Oh, hi there. I'm Woody Woodman. I'm the creative head for the One Animation Studio here in Jakarta. I've learned a few things over the last 25 years I've worked in this industry. I have a few tips. If you're interested, come on in.
Okay, for today's tip, we're going to be looking at composition and space. Now, on the Antiques TV show, we were dealing with a micro world. Was extremely challenging because if Joey and Boo came up to that picnic table, look at the composition challenges that we had to face with all of those items on the table. When an animator is looking at laying out a scene like this, it is going to be very difficult because they really have not been trained to look at design. They really haven't, believe me, I know. So the way to simplify this is, again, I remove the color and then I start paying attention to each and every item, how they relate to each other. So this is where I can start seeing these tangents. Now, a tangent might be new to you, but a tangent is a point where two shapes or the lines, they touch or they come very uncomfortably close to touching. This creates visual tension in your design. And something like this with a picnic table with so many items on it, you really have to pay attention to space and to shapes. And how they relate to each other. Okay, this is a very simple way to do. You just simply have to train your eye to see these foreground elements and the middle ground elements and the background elements, right? And how they are actually interacting with one another. Because then you'll start paying attention to something that's called negative space. This is the space between or around the positive shapes, and this is something that's probably new to you, to actually think of each individual character or each individual prop, whatever is in your frame, as a positive shape, and then how it relates to the space around it as negative space. Okay, how do you learn this? This is something that my animators are constantly asking me, because I do it without thinking. But I've been trained. I've trained my eye. I've trained my sense of design. And this is something that you have not been trained to do. I know. I was not trained to do this in my university as well. I had to learn this on my own. It starts right back in the beginning. Look at your basic shapes. The square, the triangle, and the circle. Now, if you put these three shapes on sort of a table or a platform, just a nice horizontal line, and now start thinking about how to create your space and think about what you're doing to your design. Because the problem in CGI is that you think, because it is three-dimensional, that the sense of design doesn't apply. But remember, everything we look at is flat on a monitor or a screen. So you have to pay attention to how these shapes are relating to each other when we talk about space and depth. It's completely an illusion, people. It is an illusion. If we scale that triangle down, the illusion is that it's moving back in space. You see how the triangle went back? There's your positive shapes, and this is your negative shape, which is between or around the positive shapes. But as we push that triangle back, it's physically touching the square. Now, I know what you're thinking. What you are thinking is, when you look at your CGI set, you say, well, they're not touching. The the triangle is much further away in space, but you're lying to yourself. You're not aware that what we're looking at the triangle physically touching the square. That's what's on the screen. And remember, the screen is flat. There is no depth. And so when you start thinking of it this way and looking at your composition this way, you'll start seeing these tangents. That's the physical tension that is created between two objects touching each other on that frame. If I bring the circle over, it gets worse, doesn't it? Now the circle is also touching the triangle. I mean, it is going to be completely uncomfortable to look at. So we move it back. Now when we move it back further in space, the triangle is now overlapped by the square. See, it's tucked in behind. And that makes a much better looking design. The shapes are more interesting around the triangle as well. There's your positive shapes. And there's your negative shapes. You see? It creates a more interesting, the shapes between your shapes is more interesting. There's more variety in the design. Foreground, middle ground, background. There is a sense of space because of the scaling. Each object has gotten smaller, but we're going to pay attention to the design. That's something you're not familiar with. If I move that square over, I create a problem. You don't think it's a problem, but it is a problem because of where the square has met the triangle, right at the tip of the triangle. You've divided the triangle in half, and that is a visual tension. That is a tangent. We move the square over. Now we can't see the triangle at all, but look where you've divided the circle in half. This creates a visual tension. I move it further to the... This is what happens. The animator just simply continues to move things around, but they're not seeing those tangents. They're there. Just look at the shapes. You have to flatten them, and then you'll see it. Okay. Now I've moved it back. I've overlapped the circle. Now it's getting better. I've corrected that. If I move it so there's no tangent, but I've moved it to the right, but look how evenly spaced the square, the circle, and the triangle. They go back in space, but the spacing between each object is very even and dull. Bring the triangle up. Bring it up. There we go. Avoid the tangent. Okay. Now this is going to be much better. We bring the square even further to the foreground. It's getting better. I have the overlap. Now you have a better design. Do you see the triangle? This will take you about 20 years to learn, but once I start composing with triangles, my sense of space and depth and the design is going to continue to get more dynamic and more interesting. That's harder to explain, but you can just take my word for it. If we create triangles in our design, it's going to greatly improve the design. So when you're dealing with something like this on Antics, we really have to pay attention to the characters and every object in the foreground, the middle ground, the background, and how they interact. This is what's going to create strong design by avoiding these tangents. Even though those cupcakes are in the background and we're going to change the depth of field and we're going to make them blurry, the basic shape cannot interact poorly with your character. Okay? Everything has to be thought out. Everything has to be arranged. Take a look at this one. It's pretty good. I mean, she's stuck inside the jello. The fruit is sort of framing her. And look at the the jello mold is sitting on sort of a platform. But look at how the platform is interacting with Boo in the jello mold. Let's take a closer look. Remove the color. Now, do you see the problem? There's tangents. The knee and the toe are intersecting and touching that platform. To correct it, simply move her up a little bit. Now we're paying much closer attention to that negative shape, okay, around the character, how they're interacting with the background. This is what's going to make a strong design in every frame. When you get shots like this, these can be incredibly difficult. But how do you space them? How do you place them? How do you arrange them to avoid the tangents, to create good variety of shapes, big shapes, middle shapes, small shapes? And how do they react to each other? It's as simple as that.
Thank you for stopping by. I hope you enjoyed the tip. If you want to learn more, stop by again. Better yet, give us a call. We're looking for animators. Bye-bye.